We're going to start with this. I'm going to be intentionally provocative. Before I even go into this, Ralph Waldo Emerson has a quote. Do you remember that quote, Nads?
Mm-hmm.
How does it go again?
Your good must have some edge to it, else it is none.
That's exactly right. So truth is handsomer than the affectation of love. Your good must have some edge to it, else it is none. Okay, so that's one thing I think that differentiates the Good Athlete Project from other similar things. And let me say this, I am not going to talk down to any organization that is trying to promote positive coaching and make the world a better place. I never would. But I'm also really interested in what is effective. Okay, I'm on board with good intentions, and I want effective means as well. So sometimes that takes oftentimes, always, let me just go ahead and say that, always that takes accurate looking. It takes some sort of accurate looking. It takes using language well. And I'm not saying you have to have a master's degree in language or something like that, but being intentional about the language that we've used. Actually, I'm going to come down here and grab this, because it's funny how many times today I heard speakers say things that were so, and this is unplanned, so on brand with what we're about. It was just really, really encouraging. Talking about helping kids feel like they have a greater sense of control, giving them agency. Coach Mukes has mentioned the word intentionality many times, and it always starts with observation. Let's see. I love the idea, by the way. Many young people can't distinguish between emotion and thought. The quote that I referenced just a second ago is from a book called Self-Reliance, and the ability to self-reflect might be the most empowering thing that we can give young people and that we can enlist within ourselves in order to do so. Anyway, sports teach life lessons. That's bullshit. And just go with me on this for a second, and I'm sorry for swearing, but I think it's a little bit of a myth. I think sports have the potential to teach life lessons. I learned a lot about who I am today. I learned a ton through sports. I think all of us did. It's probably why we got into this profession. But I do believe that takes too much ownership off the coach. Okay? I think the truth is that intentional teachers and coaches use sports as a platform to teach life lessons. This stuff doesn't happen automatically. Okay? I don't know anyone who is shooting baskets in their backyard that is learning about resilience and character and grit and all these things that have the potential to help someone long term, at least not in the same way that they could in your presence in the midst of your culture when the experiences are framed by you. So purpose is a big thing that we talk about all the time. Okay, because if we don't identify that as our purpose, then I'm not sure it's going to be possible to achieve it. Having leadership qualities is one thing. Okay, having leadership qualities is one thing. Being a leader is something different, and it requires this. Because if you're not leading people in a direction, then you are, what was it, you might be asleep. You might have all the characteristics, but you might be asleep. Okay, pick a direction, take people in it, be willing to adjust, move to plan B if necessary, but leaders lead. You have to have a direction to lead in. Purpose is absolutely essential. I'm going to assume for the rest of today that we are all interested in some form of human optimization. So in this setting, it makes perfect sense. In our world, it makes perfect sense that human optimization would be something physical. It would be strength, it would be speed, it would be mechanics, it would be health and wellness, all those things. What we teach people in order to get them here should take them to similar sorts of success in the rest of their life. Otherwise, and I'm obsessive about sports, but I'm willing to say this, otherwise, what really are we doing? If we win a couple football games, and I like winning football games, I don't, make no mistake, but what really are we doing? That said, if we can use the motivation within sports, and the word good, we just talked about this, is sort of has a double meaning. Again, we don't want to criticize kids for wanting to be good athletes, like actually go faster and be stronger and win games. If you want a championship, great, let's go get one. But it's our responsibility as coaches to use that desire to be a good athlete in terms of performance and make sure that they are community enhancing, that they're becoming set on the path to lifelong health and wellness, all assortment of other things. We are using that good athlete motivation to create good human beings. So for the rest of today, I'd like to think of this idea through two lenses. I want to think of it, obviously, what we're giving to our kids, but I also, like I said in the beginning, be well, then be great. I also want to take care of us as people. I think you will be the best version of you. Let me rephrase that. The best version of you will be the best coach for other people. There's no question in my mind about that. So this is the question that we have to confront sometimes. Are we performing at our best? It's a question you can ask your kids. It's a question you can ask yourselves. And I really like the phrasing of it because it's not like, it doesn't say how many championships have you won. It is, are you performing at your best? The assumption being the byproduct of your top order performance might bring some championships along the way. So human optimization, there's a lot of stuff that's coming out in character development research, SEL, social emotional learning research, stuff that should longitudinally, over a long enough period of time, lend itself to success in students. Things like grit. I don't know, Angela Duckworth, if that's a familiar name out here. She runs a lab at Penn. She's doing some really interesting stuff. Resilience, growth mindset, something called deliberate practice, which Professor named Anders Ericsson down at Arizona State has done a ton of work on. These are things that should push the learner and you toward human optimization. That said, those are high order performances. To be gritty, to enlist something like growth mindset, that is a high order performance. That's not a default for people. That's something that you learn and get good at. It's a high order performance. And I say that because it just doesn't always happen. So we ask this provocative question. I don't know if you can read it from back there. It says, what's wrong with you? And it's a joke. Nothing's wrong with you. You're wonderful people. That's not the idea. But I think we can all identify with this. Does anyone ever feel, and we will do show of hands just because it's late in the day and I know what sitting for a long time does to the brain and the body. So show of hands, who feels tired, stressed, anxious, lack of focus, lack of motivation, lack of direction at times in their lives? Okay? At some point every day. And we had one no hand raised. I got questions for you afterwards. I'm excited about it. I'm just kidding. But that is inspiring. But and it's a joke because we all do. And every single kid we work with is dealing with this in some way or other along the course of every single day. That's a fact. And I want to say this. It's not your fault. I don't want this to be like a scene from Good Will Hunting, but it is not your fault until you recognize how we, I won't say you, until we recognize how we could do better. Okay, and acknowledge things, see it for actually what it is, and are given an opportunity to adjust and improve. If we turn our back on that, now maybe the blame starts to shift. But until we're super aware of it, it is not your fault. This is the way that the world operates around us. It's a product of the systems that we are within. We can talk more about that in a second. This is the start of what we call the high order performance framework. Again, high order performance, things like the practice of growth mindset. Before I go on, does growth mindset, is that a familiar term? Does anyone know some of the initial studies around that? Could we get a show of hands if we'd like a brief explanation? Perfect. Growth mindset. Carol Dweck out at Stanford has been studying this for a long time, and the study that probably best illustrates what growth mindset is happened in youth math class. I don't remember what it is, maybe second or third grade. Advanced math students. They are essentially acing all the tests. They're in the high-level math class. They're doing a very nice job within this setting. They deliberately split the class. The class doesn't recognize it, but they identify, say it's a dozen kids on one side, a dozen on the other. And they treat them a certain way with using language after every test. And that way is this. A student aces a test, and then in group one, we'll call it. Group one is patted on the back and congratulated for their ability. They say, great job, another A. You are so smart. You're so good at math. You've done it again. Well done. And I think it's in part a product of the self-esteem movement that came up in, I want to say the 90s. And I'm not, no judgment there, but I think that's what that was looking at. Congratulating them for what they were good at. Group B, group two, was congratulated for their effort. It was, congrats, man. You must have really studied hard for that. You must have taken advantage of those extra, the lunch period study hours that we had. You must have really worked hard. You probably turned off The Simpsons. And I don't know, now that I say that, I don't know if the kids are watching Simpsons these days, but you must have turned off the TV last night and really studied. Anyway, you can probably see where this is going. Down the road, these kids are given an unpassable test. So they're coming home with D's and F's. And the way that they behaved in the presence of the obstacle, of the new obstacle, of the failure, was distinct. It was the group that, in group one that was told how good they were, they started questioning how good they were, right? That narrative was now broken. Am I actually good at math? Am I smart? And worse so, was my teacher lying to me this whole time? You start to question the motivator. That's even worse. Group B, however, started to self-reflect. They said, did I study as hard as I could have? I know I binged on Netflix last week. Could that time have been better spent? Right? Did I take advantage of the extra office hours? They begin to self-reflect. They reflect back on their process. But the point here is that is a high-order performance goal. Right? The ability to self-reflect and use language in your own self-talk, the ability of the teacher, of the educator, to frame an experience with accurate language, that's a talent. It's something that you can cultivate and build. I believe it's all the way up there. We believe, all the people who've been working on this model. But most books out there, we live in a like-based and headline-based economy. It's like all you got to do is this and you can have success in some abstract form. That's what a lot of things are leaning toward. I disagree. I think they're just the most fun things to talk about. I think a lot of the research is out there. You can pick up Instagram right now and see all the motivational speakers. A lot of the research out there, or a lot of the material out there, is focusing up top because that's what's fun. I think we need to be looking down here. Eat, move, sleep, and you said diet, sleep, and exercise, I think, was what you mentioned either. It's amazing. It is the bedrock of human performance. I do entire presentations just on that lower level. Okay, and the interplay between the blocks and the lower level. But, I mean, all you got to do to recognize how powerful this is consider the alternative. If you are malnourished, sedentary, and you don't sleep, you are not going to be good at a damn thing, much less the high-order performance goals that we all like to talk about to get where we want to be, to win championships, etc. So I think that's absolutely essential. We're going to talk about these in bits as we move forward. But let me just say this. The sleep thing, I'm on such a sleep kick right now. I haven't gotten a lot of it this week, so maybe that's why it's so resonant. But it is probably the most societally imposed detriment to our performance that we've got. This idea, in fact, I don't know if has anyone seen the motivational video, Bad As I Want to Breathe? You seen that one? Yeah. I used to absolutely love it, and I don't want to speak badly of someone who's I believe is really trying to do good, but if you are telling adolescents you got to be willing to give up sleep, there's a reference to a pop star not eating for 3 days. If we're saying don't take care of your nutrition and don't sleep, and that's the way to be successful, we're poisoning kids. Okay, that's an issue, especially if you're a good talker, especially if you can motivate them and really get them on your page, even more dangerous. But that's the idea. If we neglect this, we are designing our base level, essentially. We're trying to build a castle on sand. We had a house metaphor earlier, too. I mean, we're building a house on sand. Okay, the sleep thing, one more time, I'm sorry. The Guinness Book of World, if you think you are one of those chosen few, and it's like 0.01% of the population can survive on like 5.5 and be okay, you're not in the 0.01%. Let me just say that right now. Also, the Guinness Book of World Records, consider this, will allow you to juggle live chainsaws. You can walk a tightrope across any freaking canyon or valley that you want between buildings. They will no longer honor sleep deprivation records, because the absolute truth of it is that if you go long enough, you will die. You can't be good at it. You could, in theory, be good at juggling chainsaws. You cannot be good at depriving your body of one of the absolute essential components that make it function. So, I'm sorry if I get very excited about sleep. Language, communication, and relationships. I really liked the triad earlier. I love having things that we can refer back to. I think all of these things are undercut by this one. And I think it's a vertical progression oftentimes. Just imagine this. If you've been eating garbage, say you just filled up on Cheetos and Mountain Dew for a couple days and you haven't rested very well, are you going to be in a good mood or a bad mood when you deal with your either the athlete you're working with or your child at 8 o'clock at night when they're trying to finish up homework and get ready for dinner? Like, I think about this because I have been I've been on the grind before. I think I mentioned the program that we built up at New Trier started with 80 people. We now have more than 1,400 students, a staff of 8, and we're expanding into all other areas of the world. And I'm incredibly proud of it. I'm also reevaluating what I was like. I'm able to reflect now what I was like in my first couple years as as a coach, coming out of being an athlete, entering this world of coaching. I'm telling you, my last groups of the day, I'd be the first person there in the morning. I'd be the last person to leave, and I was on my grind, as they say. And I was absolutely not as good to the kids the back half of the day as I could have or should have been. And I'm not talking about being nice even necessarily. I couldn't be patient. I couldn't be creative. I couldn't adapt quite as well. Plan B wasn't an option. Okay, and I understand it now from a neurological perspective, but I think we've all kind of been there. So really important for us too. Our language, communication, relationships are degraded by our physiological state. Only then can we really talk about motivation. Okay, because I think there are two camps to motivation. Motivation is not hype. I think we think of motivation as hype, and there is room for that. I think people who know me and have been a product of our system know that I will lose my voice certain days. I'll get pretty jacked up. I like an energized atmosphere. I think if we can push people down the track that we set up for them quickly, I think we're on the road to positive results. But we have to set the track first, right? And that's what the difference, I think, between hype and motivation. Motivation is giving someone the motive to do something and creating an actionable line of habits for them to follow. Okay? Hype is something a little bit different. I also, and go with me on this is the longest slide, don't worry. I also, we decided after coming up with this that it ought to be bracketed by two really important things. The first is mindfulness. And pause if you have some hesitancy to mindfulness. Okay, because we work with, we work with kids going to play in the SEC. We work with the entire range of athletes, and we see people who are hesitant to the idea at first. In the literature surrounding this, from a neuroscientific lens, mindfulness is very simply two categories. It's either sustained focused attention or sustained open monitoring. It's FA or OM. Focused attention, open monitoring. If we would just sit here and kind of chill and pay attention to our breathing and maybe listen to the fans for a second, we are practicing mindfulness. It is only referring to being in the moment and nowhere else, really. So as far as I see it, and I understand that people on one end of the spectrum would think that I'm sort of bastardizing the idea of mindfulness and its roots, and I do understand its roots in East Asian religion. We're not really talking about that, though. We're talking about the stuff that's backed by neuroscience, or at least starting to be more heavily backed by neuroscience. Some sort of mindfulness practice in a world in which the most brilliant minds in it, where there's a phone right there, are spending every waking minute of their day trying to steal your attention and hold it. Some sort of mindfulness practice, some sort of generating the skill to be in the moment and focus, something like that will be in most curriculums within 10 years. I'm telling you, on the educational front, it's going to be part of our practice. Maybe we swap it for study hall, who knows what. But some sort of focused attention practice is going to be part of curriculums all over the place. I think it needs to be part of athletic curriculums as well. Let's say this too. We might be just mindful about what we're eating. Maybe that's our low-level mindfulness. Let's come right to the moment. Do I really want to put this second sleeve of Oreos in my mouth right now? Some of these come from real experience too, by the way. Anyway, and then morality on the other side. Also bracketed by morality. And I want to be really specific about this. We told this line all the time. We are the Good Athlete Project. We're talking about morality. But we're not coming into it with judgment. We don't know, we're not going to press anything on anyone. Every individual context is completely individual, right? We would only ask that one considers when they jump on their opportunity, how it is limiting the opportunities of others. That's the only thing. And I'm not going to tell anyone how to do it. I just think we need to be aware of it. Morality, if no other way, would look something like this. I want people to eat well. I don't want them to steal food to do so if we can help it. If your high order performance goal is a championship, fantastic. Okay, but we don't want you to slash the tires on the other team's bus in order to do so, right? So some sort of framing is absolutely essential. In fact, I'll go into this just for a moment. Harvard Business School just released a really cool study that talked about the danger of goal setting. How if we're just setting goals and we're not educating alongside those goals, that's like the most dangerous freaking thing that you can do. If you put a dollar amount, if you say you have to hit this dollar amount, business performer, or you lose your job and your family doesn't eat, you do things you wouldn't normally do to get to that number. That makes sense? Think of all the stuff that goes on Wall Street like that. If there's not some sort of conversation surrounding morality and the way our decisions impact others, I think that also falls flat. But as you can see, and it's kind of a theme of the day, this is a fully integrated approach. I don't think if we just sit here, we fall short. There's a huge mindfulness kick. There's a huge mindfulness kick going on in the world. Lots of studies come out to support it. A few have come out to kind of undercut it, saying, well, mindfulness doesn't work. Well, fine. Mindfulness on 3 hours of sleep does not work. You're exactly right. This is a component system. It has to fit together. Anyway, we're going to talk briefly about movement and exercise because that's part of what we do. We ran a study out at Harvard trying to measure the affective improvements that come through, this is what we were talking about earlier, that come through a focused version of exercise that is correlated with a lot of research. It comes from mostly stuff in lower mammalian populations like rats and stuff like that. So we essentially want to say, in the presence of increased amounts of dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and in fourth place, acetylcholine, can we affect people's mood, focus, and wakefulness? Because that's really the question you're asking. We're talking about mind-enhancing brain. That's all well and good, but I don't know what a +3 on the serotonin scale looks like exactly. I want a kid to say, yes, I could focus in class easier, right? Or I was in a better mood. I'm excited to learn. Very briefly, we ran the study. We found mood, focus, and wakefulness went up dramatically. We also found almost equivalent, in some cases even more, decreases, drops in mood, focus, and wakefulness in the control group. And what that means, as we all know, is the control group was essentially the same study, but we swapped exercise in the way that we've been doing it. We swapped exercise for just sitting. So they sat for 20 minutes. Everything else was the same. And they were pissed off, couldn't focus, and tired just from that one swap, just from that one quick swap. Now, we did a second study because this was done with graduate students. They knew they were opting into a situation where exercise was a thing because they had to show up in sport shorts. We told them they had to meet certain physical criteria to join the study. So we're like, this is probably skewed, okay, because we have people who are not exercise averse. If we want to install this in schools, then we need to take a more randomized population. So we did. We unleashed it on a bunch of high school athletes that didn't know what they were getting into. We collected 517 surveys, and we essentially found the same thing. A muted version of the same thing, which I guess makes sense. This is including all the students who wouldn't sweat in the middle of the day if they got paid for it. So very positive ideas in all these areas. If you are in a better mood, think of working your way up the framework. If you're in a better mood, how good are your relationships with people, right? Especially considering the alternative. And check out the alternative. It's pretty dramatic. Distribution across class periods. If at the end of this when we have Q&A, anyone wants to know more about the actual study, I'm happy to talk about it. It might be a touch boring, so I'll scoot by, but I'll be here all day. Like I said, those three things absolutely influence language, communication, and relationships. Sleep is the other big one. I mentioned some of the things already, the Guinness Book of World Records, but in the collection of the data for that study I just mentioned, we tried to follow people into their next classrooms. Like, does the focus hold? Does the mood improvement hold? Following them into their next classroom. Anyway, we didn't get much out of that, to be honest, but the stuff that we just sort of collected on accident, this is not good science. You should know what you're trying to collect going into it, but the secondary findings were, of all the pre-scores, people were ranking wakefulness as the lowest. Relatively speaking, that was the lowest. People are tired. I guess we can linger there because I'm telling you right now, I don't know how many people are a lot of people high school coaches here? A lot of high school coaches? Some? None. Okay. Well, that's what high schools look like, I promise. Anyway, secondary findings, we followed kids into math class, asked them similar questions. Wakefulness was always the lowest on the scale. Below even self-reported natural inherent ability in math, which is sort of notoriously low. Wakefulness beat it. Wakefulness was the lowest by far. And the write-ins were like kind of scary, super compelling. Kids were like, I'm tired. I didn't sleep much last night. These answers, response to the survey, might be off because I stayed up late for a test. And then there was one that I get choked up just thinking about it. This was a freshman class, a freshman math class. And we've got a young lady saying, I can't read, write, or think straight. I haven't had more than 5 hours of sleep this week. I'm telling you, I think we are looking at a problem that is just kind of drifting below the surface, and it's not that cool to say, like, get more sleep. It's way cooler to take a picture of your alarm clock at 4 o'clock a.m. and do the hashtag rise and grind, right? It's way cooler to do that than it is talk about this, but I actually have an idea if anyone wants to get on board. I want to start going to bed early, 9 o'clock, hashtag, like, in bed early to train, something along those lines, because I think the people who are waking up at 4 are probably going to bed at 9. They're just not pushing that out on social media. But I'm telling you, but this, I can't believe it. And I actually know the young lady, so it gets me even more. But like, how is she is set up for this. If she continues this, and she's a high achiever and very smart, if she continues this, she will crash and then hopefully rebound. But that's the best we can hope for. She will crash and hopefully rebound. There's no chance that this is a recipe for success. And we've taught her this. She's 14 years old when she took this. Anyway, if that's not compelling enough, we said, okay, fine, let's use people's desire to be good at their sport, make something performance-based. We conducted another survey, and essentially we tracked swim athletes through their taper, pre- and post-season scores. If you average less than 6.5 hours per night of sleep, you are 4 times more likely to finish in the bottom half of your team in terms of performance improvement. Now, to us, that makes total sense. The reason something like that doesn't resonate with the kids is because of something we're calling the talent delusion. Because 4 times more likely to finish in the bottom half in terms of performance improvement doesn't mean you finished on the bottom half of the team. Okay, so you could have been getting 4th place all year. Your times could have been fine. You could have won a handful of meets. You were 2nd in conference, whatever. That doesn't mean that we are, going back to our purpose, optimizing our potential. We're tricking ourselves, right? We are I don't know. I get heated about it. But I think we all need to be aware of this because the truth is we're doing it too. Okay? Coaches are absolutely doing it too and wearing it as a badge of honor. Okay? And if we're the most powerful models in that space, in what I think is the most powerful learning environment that exists, then we gotta find a different badge of honor, in my opinion. Again, the interconnectivity of the bedrock of the performance. Anyone heard of leptin and ghrelin? They're 2 really essential hormones in our appetite. This is essentially what it looks like. Before eating, ghrelin is up, leptin is down, and then after eating, that balance flips to essentially control our appetite, to tell us that we are satiated. Those are things that are kicked in that says, okay, you've done enough. Pull back, now go move, or whatever it might be. These things are affected pretty dramatically by how much we sleep. So leptin, you can see, the amount of leptin is adjusted, and I don't want to go, this is such an unattractive graph, I'm realizing now in front of everybody, that I don't really want to talk about it too much, but you can see how leptin, which is rising, ghrelin is decreasing, in the presence of how much sleep we are supposed to be getting. If you only get 6 hours of sleep, your leptin's down here instead of the 8.5 or 9 where it's up there. And right now, I bet a lot of people in the room are thinking, I don't get 8.5 or 9 hours of sleep during the course of the week. Okay, no judgment. But I will say that we ought to be aware that we are essentially flipping the order of leptin and ghrelin production. You are going to be hungry for things when your body doesn't actually want it. You are going to be hungry for things that are have high caloric density, that are kind of garbagey, because you lost sleep, if that makes sense. You lost sleep, your hormonal production was adjusted, and understandably so, because when you are sleep deprived, your body goes into survival mode, so it's craving calories and wants to pack them on and wants to make sure that you are alive, because we are better at one thing than anything else, and that is staying alive. That's a primary function of the human body, is get another shot, come back tomorrow. Okay, so it's natural, but it's amazing how we sleep affects how we eat. I would like us all to reflect. Because this is the number one question we ask people as we enter for consultation, when we host workshops with teams. It's, does your behavior match your goal? If we are trying to set students up for success, we have to identify what it means, evaluate our process, check it alongside our results, and then ask this very real question and be willing to ask it over and over again without judgment, just with accuracy for the sake of improvement. I'm going to run through what we call character by design. I'll also give a quick plug. We love Oklahoma City now. We've been down here like 10 times or so, and We have good friends down here now, which is great. So we would certainly be willing to come back and conduct a workshop at a school if that were of interest to anyone. What we do, our primary workshop is called Character by Design. And what that looks like is we identify a superordinate goal, and we do it without judgment. Say it's a championship. We go in and we talk to a basketball team. They want to win a championship. Fine. We work with the team to outline. Who was it? Was it Coach Meeks? Was that you? Begin with the end in mind? Yes. Same idea. And then we use them to help us build back. So we say, what are the essential components to winning a championship? They might say it's winning a sectional, beat the big rival, win a certain number of games. Fine. So far, fairly superficial, not the stuff that we really like to talk about, but it's true, so we'll say it and we'll acknowledge it. Then we start to go into these lower order components. What's important for winning a sectional? Well, we got to have a healthy, long season. What are some other components of health? What feeds into health? Sleep, as we identified, might be one of them. And again, we are sourcing these responses from the students. The kids are giving us this. We're not going in with this answer. Then we say, what is our sleep standard going to be? 8 hours a night. Fine. Pretty basic, pretty average, very doable, even with the most ambitious people, and that's a conversation we have a lot, and I'm happy to have it again today. But let's say it's 8 hours. Then we start to identify the barriers. It's like, what are the barriers to getting 8 hours of sleep? One of my favorite stories about this comes from an actual workshop we did, is we had this big, he's a 6'2", offensive guard, middle linebacker type, stoic, fully stoic. Great posture. He had great posture. And straight face the whole time, ready to go, always ready to go. We're sourcing the answers. What's getting in the way of our sleep? He goes, Coach, every night after dinner, I crave something sweet, and Coach, I love chocolate. And I start eating it around 8:30, and 10:30 comes around, and I'm still eating chocolate, and I can't get to sleep. And it was so honest and not at all what, I thought he was going to say, I'm too jacked up I'm watching film and all this kind of stuff. He's like, I just eat too much candy. And I was like, well, that's an honest answer. And so one of our habits, one of our goals, and this is what we ultimately give to people, our list of actionable habits, was no chocolate after dinner. So same craving, swapped it out for strawberries or fruit or something like that, and he's on his way. And then we have them articulate the backwards build. He doesn't eat chocolate, so that he can get his 8 hours of sleep because it's an essential component to health. We got to get through sectionals if we want to get to our championship. We think through that a couple times, okay, and then we just do it. And then we've got our actionable, homemade, site-specific set of goals that actually work for people. And I think, just to kind of plug the project again, I think one thing that makes us different is we don't think we have the magic bullet. We think we have a framework. We think that our methods are well researched, and we really, want to be good about what we do. But we work with students on the north side of Chicago, fairly affluent areas. We work with students on the south side of Chicago, which is, and anything that you've heard about Chicago, that's the area I'm talking about. Okay? And what works in those settings is wildly different. It's different than what we do in San Francisco, which is different than Boston, which is different than Austin, which is different than Limerick, Ireland, or Port-au-Prince, Haiti. The framework is similar. The anchors to our concepts are similar. But the way that we kind of shift to plan B when necessary, the way that we adapt and adjust and move forward is adjustable, and it can only happen with the input of the people. So this is actually that exact workshop. So we gather all this data. We don't assume much, right? We have them give it to us. And then the kind of magic, the thing that we really try to make sure is alive in every one of our workshops is that everything below this sort of superficial line, everything from these tangible goals down feeds into the high order performance framework. So everything that we are asking children to do, young people to do, feeds into that thing that will ultimately lead to their best interest, their success, their health and wellness, regardless of where they go post-career. We want it to work in the moment, and we want them to set it up, and we want it to set up for whatever they do down the line. Some people say that seems like a lot of work, and it is a lot of work, but you only have to do it once and then revisit occasionally, and what you're doing, just so you know, just to validate the work, is we are activating something super important. It's called the premotor cortex, and the brain can be, here's an easy way to think about this. The brain is the most complicated thing that we are aware of, more complicated than the known universe, okay? The way that we imagine information crossing it is like walking through a forest. So it's just a bramble, just a mess of forest. And when you walk from point A to point B, think about the first time you learned like the Pythagorean theorem or how to break down a defense or whatever it might have been. It's slow, and it can even be semi-painful. But if you walk it enough times, it becomes more and more fluid. And we activate the premotor cortex, and when we go through the good thinking of like, why am I not eating this piece of chocolate after dinner, right? Why am I turning that down and opting for strawberries instead? It moves by being so intentional and by activating the cortex. We are moving to a place where reactive is now potentially a positive thing. There's just not as much deliberation needed on the front end. Keep doing good work. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.